numbers. So.
Yeah, and I know that often government has to lead the private sector in these regards, and so, there are many different, things to look at, of course, while we would be considering this. Also, regarding, all right, sorry, getting a little off track here. Anyway, so it's an interesting discussion to explore for sure.
Allison, President Rosa, Allison?
Thank you. I just wanted to know, I'm not following all the living wage proposals going on throughout the country, and is this, how is 16 the number? Is there something like the state's proposing it or something like that?
Because you're saying 15 wouldn't even get you to a livable wage here.
Yeah, 15
Yeah.
times 20, 40 hours is like 30,000.
Right. So we're not. So the agenda item is to discuss a $15 living wage.
Well, that's just, the number, that seems to be the number that groups
Okay.
are
Maybe we
talking
would
about.
strike with living
Yeah.
wage and say $15.
So I guess that's the question. Like, are you really talking about increasing the village's pay scale so that it's gets you to whatever that would be?
No, I'm not suggesting that.
Oh,
And
okay.
I'm suggesting that both the village and the school board take this action.
Okay. I'm trying to get clarity on what the.
Scratch living wage, I think that we've established. That's
So
not really
you're just talking about getting
$15
us to $15 minimum.
minimum wage.
For a 40-hour a week person. I mean, if
Ah.
it's if it's a shelver at the library who works 10 hours as a student job, that they're not relying on that
Okay.
income to
I guess
to
I'm
live.
just not following the logic of your argument was that they need to be able to afford to live here. And this
No, the
right
argument,
now.
the logic I was saying is that the $15 an hour, I mean, we could do 20, but that would be kind of hard to reach. And $15 an hour seems to be the number that these groups across the country are saying. So it's being consistent with what, is the national movement on this. And I was only pointing out that at $15 an hour, you're still not 30% of your income at $50 an hour, is not gonna afford you a $1,500 apartment. But again, I mean, what's the,
Sort of
I mean,
first step.
I was
Yes.
kind of throwing out an average for a
Okay.
2-bedroom
Right.
apartment. I mean, for a studio, it's complicated.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
just
it's-
trying to follow the logic there.
Yeah, I think it's kind of incremental step.
Yeah.
And Jessica.
Yeah, I mean, so nationwide, large retailers are, incrementally raising their start rates and, I think that that's also part of it is looking at that start rate of, anybody new that we also hire. So is it somebody who's full-time? And I think we can't go from somebody who's making $12 or $10 and jumping that up to, $20 an hour. I think a $15 step is it is closer to a living wage and something that is much more sustainable, especially if you're in a 2-income household that may allow you to live in Shorewood. So I think that the thought is to somewhat catch up to some of the changes that are happening in the private sector, and I also think to help us be competitive. And to be able to retain talent, especially, if you could work at Kohl's or Target and get $15 an hour, but we'd really like to keep that talent, if within our community. I think that I think it's a good step, so.
I understand
I have just one, I'm sorry, is there anybody else in line?
No, you're first in the queue.
Okay, thanks. I am, if we decided to pursue this and research it further, I think it would be very important to talk with businesses of our community, who would be the most effective. Granted, it's only if they get government work, but I think that we're taking a step to kind of lead it to that direction. That would be important. And I assume that we wanted this to apply to crossing guards and some of the wouldn't. If you're only doing full-time work,
Right.
then that would not be effective. And so I just wanted to mention that. I personally am not a huge proponent of raising the living wage. I think that there are some topics Democratic here, and I think there's some major points that need to be considered before doing that, for setting that precedent. But I'd be glad to discuss it, and if everyone wanted to vote to look into this, I certainly would participate.
Mike?
Yeah, I'd like trustee Carpenter's comment about kind of a gradual or some type of transition, because it's real key. I mean, I've worked for a contractor in many governments, city of Madison, city of Milwaukee County, and as a contractor, it's difficult to administer where you have a funder who's asking you to do something unique from your other funders. So you have to provide them time to transition. So like if we contract for janitorial service and their hourly starting wage is 13, and we say you have to pay 15, what do they do with their other, business, their other employees? Or if it's a family-run business somehow, and they have family members. I support trying to expand the rate we're paying, but it definitely would take more research, like volunteers receiving stipends, like students, college students that are getting a stipend, working out the mechanics so we do not disrupt, or it creates a situation where people can't bid on the work, and we have fewer bidders on the work. So.
Emily, sir.
Oh, no, you were about to speak. Go.
I was just gonna say, I agree with the sentiments expressed by both of you, by both Jessica and Mike. I think that it's certainly something I think you're gonna take incremental steps here, but it's something I would support looking into. I think there's a lot of variables yet to be resolved and a lot of things to look at, but I would support it. Emily?
And I think Trustee McCabe had her hand up too. I'll go after the people who haven't spoken.
You couldn't see, I was gonna leave.
I have Emily, Tammy, and question.
I think one question we haven't really addressed here is whether this is an action that the school board and the village board need to take together, or because, and if so, why, what would be the rationale for that? So, I mean, like any statement we make, like, it's more powerful if we're all doing it, like the resolution about conversion therapy, but like if it's not something that in practice we can really do uniformly, and there's not really a logistic reason for us to do it at the same time, maybe this is just something we independently explore.
I think it's a good point, Tammy.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And so thank you for that. And I also think that one of the reasons that we looked at raising I do agree that nationally people should move up to a more living wage, and I'd like to see the businesses and others, also I'd love to see them lead the charge, but I'm not gonna say that that's ever gonna happen. However, one of the reasons that we asked for the crossing guard wage to be increased is because the maker economy and people who do cobble together multiple jobs are actually at a disadvantage with lower salaries and lower hourly wages because they don't get health insurance. They don't get the fringe benefits that people in a full-time position do. So, and it's very difficult for us, as we've seen, to get crossing guards, right? I mean, so we have made it a more competitive wage to try to retain those that stayed and attract others, and we still were unable to fill all of the positions at $15 an hour. And crossing guards and other people who only work a few hours a week, that is a really tricky job because there's the commuting time getting to the job, and I'm not sure, I could be mistaken, but I highly doubt that any of the full-time, or any of the crossing guards that were hired before actually lived in Shorewood. So, that's quite a distance to get to, and some of, the crossing guards then have to get to other places of employment, et cetera. So I'm just using that as one of the examples. So if we were gonna look at a $15 an hour, adjustment in wages, I think that we would wanna look at it more, at a more global regard than just for people who are fortunate enough to have full-time employment.
I think that, since procedurally, or just like process-wise, I'm wondering if it might make sense that to look at this independently, because, and then like the village board, if we wanna pursue it, it could come up as a future item for consideration and go to like strategic initiatives or something where it could be, we could look at how many positions will it actually affect if you did it this way versus, are we really making the impact? And then the school board can decide if they wanna take it on as an issue, since no action that the village would take would automatically affect the school district. So that's what I would recommend just procedurally, cause I think a lot of good questions have come up tonight.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Any other comments on this agenda item?
I guess I would just support kind of the idea of looking at it, and if we were to go that route, to do what Trustee Carpenter said and have it be somewhat gradual, and then also expanded beyond just those that are fortunate enough to have a full-time job. I would add though, like I think the elephant in the room is that if we were to do that at the school board level, being that we have many more employees than the village does, the impact on us will be tremendous. Fast forward, we may have to ask for taxes to go up, and we want to continue or go back to a space where the village and the school board kind of work together, and at least in informal conversations, you know, we support one another and not, well, the school board's raising your taxes and we're lowering them. I would be much more amenable to this if it were a different climate. But I do still support Trustee Amenta's proposal that this be seriously considered something we bring up, especially looking at our paraprofessionals, to be more competitive in the marketplace. So I'm on board, but I do want to just, if we were to move that way, I would ask our intergovernmental partners to continue being good partners and
Right.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because, I mean, the numbers of what the tax rate increases were are black and white numbers, so is it just?
I would think that the taxes, you know, we would go up should we be increasing what we're paying, and therefore, what we've heard and what I've seen is, you know, people saying that, you know, the school board raises your taxes while the village board is working really hard to lower your taxes. Crossing guard is one instance, basically, you know, I'll be paying for it either way. It just matters which pocket it comes out of, whether it's out of my taxes that go towards the village or towards the schools. So it was great having that discussion tonight. At the end of the day, our local taxpayers are still paying for crossing guards. And then
Trustee Warren?
push,
Oh, sorry, Allison, I had to run after Pablo.
yeah, so
That's great.
I'm all for trustee your proposal. I just wanna make sure that should we go towards increasing salaries, that we then not hear, we'll see, the school board's raising your taxes.
President Rosa?
I appreciate that, and thank you for stating exactly what you mean when you're talking about intergovernmental relations. I don't understand the question, because if taxes were gonna go up based on a vote, I would say that no matter what. So if that's seen as being not a friendly intergovernmental partner, I can't comply with that. If something we're gonna do, like raise the minimum wage, is gonna increase taxes, I will say it. So can you just specify what you mean by not saying it, or saying it? I'm not sure.
Hypothetically,
He
if
doesn't
we,
want us to bash him for raising taxes if he's.
Well, we haven't doing it.
I
So I don't,
Well, I'm
Well,
sorry,
if
Pablo.
either of us.
Yeah.
I've Tammy then Mike.
So I appreciate what you said, Pablo, because yes, we are the same, at the end of the day, the taxes that people pay into Shorewood, you know, we have the same geographical and political boundaries here for our school district and our village. So the tax money, the tax base, you know, so, I appreciate that. I also, think, I really appreciate this conversation, because going into budget season, for us, we have things like the steps and ladders, we have different, the poll workers, I know, we raised their wages a couple years ago, I think they're still making well below $10 an hour for a 12-hour day. And, you know, it's difficult then to attract, you know, a variety, they're having a hard time, you know, filling those positions for our elections, which are very important positions, and again, like I said, really long hours. So, this is great food for thought for, I will speak for myself on the village board, because we've had a lot of these conversations on the board, and I just reelected to my third term, and we've been discussing, you know, seasonal and other kind of wages, and, you know, what is fair, and, you know, with our full-time employees, and we also have, new full-time staff at the senior center and stuff like that. So it's a really timely discussion, and I'm really glad that we have this tonight, so.
I think what Pablo raised, and I think it's interesting, is quantifying. I mean, there's such a broad discussion on $15 wage nationally, and we're a very progressive community. But for us as the two governmental bodies to put a number to that, because the residents are the employer of these folks, the village employees and the school board employees, and are they willing to pay the cost to raise wages to 15? I mean,
Yeah, we
people
need to
talk a
know.
lot, but are they willing to let their, pay 0.5% or 1% more in taxes?
I think that's a good point, and I think, it's why even if we act independently and, maybe we decide different things, like, it's important for us to have this conversation, because I think what we do have in common is, our constituents, right, and I think some shared values, and I think given Shorewood at least fancies itself to be a progressive community, this is one of the top progressive issues, right? So, we need to think seriously about whether we're willing, whether our constituents are willing to put their money on the line for the people they say they value. So, and I would say, as far as like people's opinions on raising taxes, I mean, the criticism that I have heard going door to door was always about what money was spent on rather than that taxes were going up. And so, I would push back slightly and just say, we don't necessarily have to raise taxes because we can cut other things. So there's always that option, which it may not realistically be a choice, but there is always that choice, like, to the degree to which we have to raise taxes or raise them at all. I think where people get frustrated is if they think that there's not due deliberation